Welcome to me, where suspenseful, thrilling, and mysterious stories will draw you into a world where the lines between reality and fantasy seem to blur. When the night falls, when all the sounds gradually quiet down, leaving only your own heartbeat and breathing, that's when these stories begin. Tensions, unsolved mysteries, moments that will make you hold your breath in fear or curiosity, all are waiting for you ahead. Find a comfortable seat, dim the lights, and let this sound guide you on a journey that is not for the faint of heart. I want each of you to leave a comment sharing where you are in the world. And if you are enjoying the episodes, don't forget to give a like and subscribe to the channel now. Relax. Are you ready? If so, join me in the first story right now. The night the engines died. The passengers of Flight 227 had just completed their meal. The cabin buzzed quietly with the clinking of silverware, an intermittent laugh, and the faint sound of rustling newspapers. Ordinary, routine sounds that masked behind the fragile facade of safety, the horror that loomed just beyond. A stewardess laughed at a joke told by a passenger. A man in first class swirled his wine, enjoying the final sip. Suddenly, the intercom crackled to life, its static sibilant as a snake wrapping its way around the unwitting passengers. Then the voice, calm, deliberate, but with an unnatural solemnity, as if the captain was reading his own obituary. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking." A moment of silence, just enough time for apprehension to germinate. "I need to inform you of an issue." The words hung in the air, like an executioner's blade, poised to drop. The atmosphere changed instantly, as though an unseen presence had blown a chilly breath over the cabin, permeating every crack and crevice, wrapping around each traveler like invisible fingers clenching into a fist. Talk stalled. Laughter died, to be succeeded by tense silence, as though the whole aircraft had sucked in its communal breath. The pilot went on, his voice strained with shame, but shaking under the burden of the nightmare he had created. "In my hurry to leave Charles de Gaulle Airport, I failed to adequately monitor our fuel levels." A long, ragged pause ripped through the intercom, as though he was fighting to get out the words. "I am ashamed to say this. I know I have let you all down." A hollow, uncomfortable silence fell over the cabin, choking the air like an invisible hand squeezing against each chest. The pilot paused to catch his breath before continuing, his voice cracking under the strain. "Since we have been flying for a long time, our destination could be beyond our reach, since we may lack sufficient fuel to get there." The finality of his confession hit the passengers like a physical blow, drawing the air out of the cabin as though the aircraft itself had inhaled a gasp of horror. Some cried out loud. Others were paralyzed, their hands clenching armrests so hard that their knuckles whitened, as though through sheer force of will they could halt the unstoppable. A man grasped at his chest, his breathing shallow and fast, the first spasms of fear gripping his heart. The aircraft, once a sanctuary of order and technology, was now a prison of uncertainty. A metal coffin cutting through the emptiness at 500 miles an hour. Every flashing light, every jolt of turbulence seemed to foretell disaster. The whispers of fear were growing louder, building into a jarring buzz of terror. There were no strangers then, just the doomed, held together by the unspoken grasp of fear as they spoored toward some unknown destiny. And then another violent and convulsive shudder that ripped through the aircraft as if it had been seized in a death grip by an invisible hand. One of the engines coughed, sputtered, and died. The whole plane shuddered as if it had been hit by an invisible blow. A jolting crash of bone that threw passengers from their seats and sent loose objects flying through the cabin. The sickening lurch sent drinks crashing, trays falling to the floor, and overhead lockers bursting open, their contents spilling into the aisle. Gasps turned to screams as the cabin tilted, the aircraft going into an unnatural descent. The aircraft had already started to descend to New York, but now it was plummeting, no longer descending in a controlled manner, but spiraling out of control. The cabin lights flickered madly, casting crazed shadows on faces paralyzed with terror. The aircraft lurched violently, its damaged fuselage objecting to the stress. Oxygen masks dropped from the ceiling like ghostly apparitions, dangling inertly amidst the chaos. The cabin erupted into pandemonium. Screams of abject terror, cries for assistance, the raspy howls of those who recognized the inevitable. The night sky outside, once an endless expanse of stillness and silence, now pressed in like the walls of a closing tomb. The vastness had turned suffocating, a cosmic void ready to consume them. Below, the earth was no longer a distant haze, but a giant, looming thing, reaching out to snatch them with an appetite that threatened to consume them. City lights unfurled like streaks of flame, oblivious to the souls above, speeding towards their fate. The altimeter ticked down at a remorseless pace. The aircraft was still too far from New York City. Its decreasing altitude, a grim countdown, without reprieve. There were no longer any alternative airports, no deviations, just the relentless descent, and the understanding that hope was running through their fingers like sand in a gale. The cockpit was a maelstrom of confusion. Alarms screaming, warning lights flashing like a dying pulse. The aircraft strained against gravity, shuddering so violently the control panels creaked. The first officer's white-knuckled fists held tight to the yoke, his forehead beaded with sweat. His voice, strained and almost lost in the din of automated warnings, sliced through the chaos. The second engine coughed, sputtered, and with a final agonizing splutter, died in silence. A jolting stillness filled the cockpit, broken only by the otherworldly shriek of wind whistling past the fuselage. It was the kind of stillness that felt unnatural, deafening in its absence of power. A stillness that presaged catastrophe. The aircraft, a marvel of controlled engineering, was now reduced to a huge metal husk, a crippled glider flying through the darkness. The control panels blacked out, their frantic warnings muted, as if even the plane itself had given up. The first officer's breath caught, his fists still gripped on the dead yoke, as if sheer willpower could urge power back into the engines. His eyes bulged wide, darting to the altimeter, its numbers free-falling with heart-stopping speed. The first officer's knuckles turned white on the throttle. We're dead stick. No thrust. The captain's mind reeled. We can glide this in. His voice, which he tried to keep steady, trembled. He was not sure. It seemed to take forever for the ram air turbine to deploy. Its little turbine opening up into the howling wind like a desperate last gasp prayer to the emptiness. Inside the cabin, the flight attendants strode down the aisles with stiff formality, their faces drawn but determined, their voices, strained as they were, carried the authority of rehearsed command. "Brace for impact, please," one of them screamed, her voice hardly cutting through the noise. A few passengers complied at once, throwing themselves forward, arms clasped around their heads. Others were paralyzed, their brains locked in denial, unable to comprehend the unimaginable. One man struggled with his seatbelt, shaking so hard he couldn't locate the buckle. A woman clutched the armrest so hard her fingernails cracked on the plastic. The emergency lights strobed feebly, casting eerie shadows that twitched on faces contorted in terror. People shrieked, a loud, grating cacophony of terror. Some embraced their loved ones. Others slapped hands over their faces, screams muffled by the deafening quiet of the plummeting plane. A flight attendant, holding onto the back of a seat for balance, mouthed frantic reassurances no one heard. The aircraft vibrated heavily, the fuselage complaining in protest to the strain of its powerless plummeting. Unsecured items flew around the cabin, bouncing off chairs and people. Each passing second seemed impossibly long, as if the fabric of time itself had rent asunder under the threat of disaster. The captain gritted his teeth, his hands trembling over the controls. The glide of the plane was erratic, its path a hardly controlled plunge into the emptiness. The cockpit echoed with alarms, relentless, screaming their warnings in a cruel mockery of hope. smoke from the failing systems wreathed through the dim light. The acrid scent of burning circuits searing his lungs, and then, out of the spinning darkness, out of the turmoil, he saw it, a faint, glimmering glow in the distance, cutting through the blackness like a sliver of salvation. New York City, runway lights, a fragile lifeline quivering in the fog, teasingly distant. But could they reach it? Or was it an illusion, a mirage in the final few seconds before extinction? The first officer's breath caught, his heart racing in his throat, as his eyes locked onto the gleaming light ahead. We might make it, after all, he whispered, his voice trembling with a faint, desperate hope, as though saying the words aloud could make it so. But beneath his words was the unspoken fear, the knowledge that they were still at the mercy of gravity, the wind, and fate itself. But they hadn't reached there yet. The trees rose like shattered black shapes, their gnarled branches reaching out greedily toward the plane, as if to pull it down into nothingness. He had seconds. His grasp of the yoke was vice-like, his knuckles white under the faint glow of the flickering gauges. The plane bucked in an irregular motion that was wild, turbulence and gravity resisting every movement. His heart throbbed in his head, but his mind was fixed in steel-sharp concentration. The first officer took a deep breath. Hold it just a little longer. The branches on top of the trees were closing in. The runway lights continued to flicker ahead, teasingly near, yet impossibly distant. They were on the brink of salvation or doom. One last risk, one last wild maneuver. With a violent tug on the controls, he went for the gap. The tops of the trees scraped the underside of the plane, ripping at the undercarriage. The sound of metal on wood screamed through the cabin, and then a deafening, bone-crushing bang. A merciless cacophony of screaming metal and bursting steel, as if the heavens themselves had fallen. The force of impact vibrated through the fuselage, seats ripped from their mounts, bodies tossed around like dolls, flames licked along the broken edges of the aircraft, illuminating the darkness in an otherworldly, flickering glow. A choking cloud of smoke rolled through the wreckage, its acrid grip tightening around every strangling breath of air. The ground trembled with aftershocks, debris still creaking and groaning in the burning wreckage. Then, silence. A fragile, unnatural silence, shattered only by the crackles of fire and the rough, strained breathing of those who remained alive. There were cries from the rubble, some in the distance, some close, bare with pain and shock. The reek of smoldering petrol clung to the air, a bitter reminder of how close they had come to complete destruction. And when the smoke finally cleared, the twisted remains of the plane lay stretched out like a broken, tortured thing, its bare skeleton scarcely discernible as the great ship that it once was. And yet, despite all the odds, everyone was alive, poised between the salvation and oblivion, balanced on the brink of an impossible second chance. The captain, bruised and inexplicably alive, gasped as he released his harness, his sweat-soaked fingers shaking with aftershock. His ribs throbbed with searing pain, every breath a burning reminder of the savagery they'd just survived. He hauled himself up, vision fading, the metallic flavor of blood in his mouth. The debris lay before him like the scene of a nightmare. Flames licking across scorched metal. The bitter taste of fuel and smoke choking the air. Remote, tortured screams resounded in his mind, together with the ringing that had not stopped since impact. His head reeled, replaying every mistake, every warning he had ignored. The sign of his failure weighed upon him, more oppressive than the wreckage that enclosed him. He had made a mistake that should have killed everyone. High-speed train. Congressman David Chen found himself where he never guessed he'd be. The dining car on the express. A high-speed train humming through the Hungarian countryside. A patchwork of browns and gray dirty snow flashed by. Abandoned Soviet-era factories passed surreal in skeletal frames, riddled with broken windows and crumbling walls. David's head pounded. Nausea caused him to sweat. He hated trains, but loved his wife. And the Prague conference was over. Just one more meeting. And then he and his wife could take a river cruise out of Budapest. Studying the wine list across from David sat Marcus Blackwood. When the waiter came, he ordered a 2016 Tokaji. The waiter paused and bit his lower lip, avoiding Blackwood's eyes. "We only have a 2018. Your boss promised the 2016, Blackwood said, stroking his precisely trimmed stubble. "I suggest you find it, or else." David noted his old friend, the Blackwood he'd grown up with, the new director of Aid Alliance, had mastered making threats. "Trains have a finite quality," Blackwood mused as they waited for the wine. "Once you're on them, you can't get off." David sipped water from a crystal glass. "But you can change the destination. That depends on who's controlling the switches," Blackwood said. "By the way, how's your Sarah? She starts Columbia in the fall. Is that right? The tuition must be a killer." His stomach rolled over. How did Blackwood know about the Columbia acceptance letter? "She's fine. Elizabeth and I are quite proud of her. I saw you with Elizabeth at the Prague conference. Vacation? Yes. Doubling up the conference with time in Budapest." Blackwood winked. "And a write-off for the entire trip?" Blackwood tossed his right hand. "I was thinking about how we've known each other since the early days. Hell, I was at your wedding. We're warriors you and I. Into the breach and all that. Well, this warrior is getting tired of the congressional grind. I'm thinking of not running next term. Call it quits. Blackwood laughed, his thick frame tight against his dress shirt. Say it ain't so. No, I would quit. But there's more I want to do. A few years, maybe. Then on to the speaker circuit. Or maybe a pack. The waiter returned with a 2016. We're in luck, Mr. Blackwood. He opened the wine, offered a taste, then served them both. He carefully placed the bottle on the immaculate white tablecloth. About your upcoming committee vote, Blackwood said. Aid distribution, of course, is of paramount importance. But with our audit showing only 30 cents on the dollar reaching recipients, there's some pushback we're fighting against. I've reviewed the proposal, David said. $8 billion might take some time to get through committee. Blackwood adjusted his broad shoulders and smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. We need to think about this from the 30,000-foot view, he said. After all, think of the optics. We're supporting democracy, fighting corruption, and aiding fledgling governments who need the world's help. The waiter refilled their wine glasses while the two men looked on. When he left, Blackwood gulped his wine, leaned into the table, and reached out to adjust David's tie. Our organization believes there's a benefit to a network of partners. We need expertise to walk us through a complex banking system, the regulatory environment. Would you consider getting involved? A non-profit, hip deep in money laundering, David thought. Excessive compensation, shell companies. A big plunge for a guy who doesn't fudge on taxes. Never has. Never will. I'm a congressman. I can't touch this. You know that, David said. No. Your role would be legitimate, I assure you, Blackwood said. That's what the advisory board is all about. Insurance for, he chuckled, derailments. We want you as a board member after your term ends. It's just, well, in the meantime, we'd like your advice. As a friend. The dulled rush of an opposing train sped by their window. Blackwood steepled his hands in front of him. How's Elizabeth's gallery, by the way? Her art might be worth more once she's passed. Of course, that could be decades away. We certainly don't want any harm to come to her, do we? Blackwood looked down and cut another piece of his steak. David's fork froze on the way to his mouth. He felt anger ripping his insides at the veiled threat against his wife. After slowly setting his fork down, he picked up his wine glass. His hand shook as he gripped the glass, but he gripped harder, and then harder still. The train entered a tunnel. David lost his concentration, diverted by the sudden brightness of the two men's reflection in the window. He stared at the image, but the man in the reflection who looked like him didn't stare back, but shattered the glass with his hand. David stared, transfixed. His reflection picked up a shard with his bleeding hand and wrapped the pointed glass with his cloth napkin. He then reached across the table and slashed Blackwood's throat. Blood splattered on the table as the reflection of Blackwood collapsed. The reflection blanked out as the train shot from the tunnel exit, the horn howling into the twilight. David stared at the wine glass in his hand. Blackwood was no longer across from him. David stumbled from the dining car. He lurched down the corridor to his sleeper cabin, fell into Elizabeth as she opened the door, reeled to the water closet, and retched in the toilet. "David, what happened?" Elizabeth called through the door. "My God!" The train approached the outskirts of the city. High rises ahead, pinned to the night sky. The lights in the windows staring down. Soon the train squealed into the station. Elizabeth gripped her husband's arm as they walked to the taxi stand, her eyes riveted on his face. "David? Darling? Are you okay? What happened?" "It's nothing," he said. She held him closer. "Are you feeling better? Talk to me. Did you forget anything?" David steadied himself against his wife. "No, I haven't left anything." As they walked to the taxi stand, he felt in his gut that Blackwood was gone. He realized he'd left him on the train. Some things you can never explain, he thought. But then he felt oddly privileged. He smiled, and even the grime of Budapest tasted a little cleaner. Fate, or science, or the devil himself had stepped in. But not God, he thought. No, this wasn't God. It was another presence who didn't like the alliance, weighing the direction of his daughter's future, his wife's safety, or the price for his looking the other way. "Your hand's bleeding," Elizabeth said. "It looks like a piece of glass, the trip of a lifetime. The trees are so much bigger out here," I said, as I looked out the passenger side car window. We were driving from the airport in the cab we just got. The lady driving was rude. She barely even looked at us. But we're out of there, and officially on vacation. The flight was long. I tried to sleep, but the man next to me was a talker. "I'm too nice," my girlfriend says, "but that's what keeps the world a better place." Besides, the man kept buying me drinks, which is why I'm looking out the window. I might hurl, "And greener. This place is beautiful," says Kenny. We're finally in the Pacific Northwest. Our bags are packed, and we're headed to Mat Hood. We have a week out here, and 4 days spent in the mountains. Kenny has family out here, so we're staying with his aunt the first night. And then we're off to breathe that crisp forest air. We made it to his aunt's house. She was so warm and welcoming. I felt right at home. After a nice meal of homemade beef stew and a shower, I was ready for bed. I bid them good night, and off I went, fast asleep in no time. I woke up in a panic. The room unfamiliar. Where am I? I thought, as my senses start to adjust. There's a soft buzzing coming from the fluorescent lights above me. My arms and legs are secured to this hospital bed, it seems. But this doesn't feel like a hospital. It's too cold. I try to move my head, but that's secured too. Hello? I call, but no answer. Hello. Again silence. Suddenly a man is standing above me. He covers my mouth as I go to scream once more. Shut up! They'll know you're awake. And then they'll make you forget. You mustn't forget. It's not safe. Run! Something pokes me, and I'm out again. I awake in bed, extremely well rested. It's 6:00 a.m. What a crazy dream, I thought, as I smelt the coffee. I jump out of bed and run to the kitchen, where Kenny's Aunt Gloria is standing in her long silk lavender-colored nightgown and matching slippers. She seems so frail, yet strong and intimidating at the same time. A soft smile forms as she bids me good morning. Ken's not up yet, but you're more than welcome to join me for some bean water, she says with a chuckle. I follow her outside to the patio. The air is fresh and moist, the coffee warm and delicious. You can see the sun glisten off the morning dew as the birds sing their welcome to the day. It sure is nice of you to let us stay here, I say. Kenny and I have been planning this trip for a while now, and I'm so excited it's finally happening. You two boys, be careful out there. I hear stories all the time about hikers going missing in those woods. These aren't like the mountains you have on the East Coast. These are real mountains, inhabited by really big creatures. I'm sure you've heard of Bigfoot. She says. I chuckle. Ha, Bigfoot, please. He's just a myth. If Bigfoot is real, then I hope I see him. He'll take a photo and become rich. Gloria shook her head and looked deep into her coffee, almost as if she was trying to see the bottom of her cup through the black liquid it now held. Like I said, just be careful, please. It's now 10:00 a.m., and we are on our way to the mountain. Gloria let us use her car since she doesn't drive anymore. She's 75 now, and hasn't driven since she was 70, and got lost driving home. They found her a day later, parked in a parking area 15 miles from the house. We made it to the mountain after about 2 hours of driving, and we couldn't wait to get on the trail. As we loaded up our packs, Kenny and I discussed our route, where we would stop for water and lunch breaks, where we would camp, and which streams we will pass, so we know where to collect water when we get low. All said and done, the trail up and down the mountain shouldn't take more than 3 days, but we're taking it slow since we haven't done a mountain of this caliber before, so we planned for 4 days. We're hiking Timberline Trail. It passes 3 major landmarks and has snow runoff year-round, so finding water shouldn't be a problem. In total, it's just over 41 miles. We're all loaded up and ready to start our hike, when I realize I left my trekking poles at the airport. They must have fallen out of my pack. Just find a stick on the hike. It'll serve the same purpose, says Kenny. I mock him, but I know that's what will happen. Easy for you to say. You didn't forget anything, but he did. The compass. Well, how are we supposed to know where we're going now? I ask. We still have a map, and the trails are marked. It'll be fine, he says in a not-so-reassuring voice. We've been walking for hours, and I haven't seen a single soul. It's day 2 in the woods. The first day went by so fast, but now the excitement and newness has worn off. The woods are long and damp. Flora as far as the eye can see. No roads, cars, people. Hey, are we on the right path? I ask. Yeah, we should be coming up on Cloud Cap in about 5 more miles. Ken responds. I don't believe him, though, and my body hurts. It must be from sleeping on the ground. And I kept having the dream about the guy telling me to run. Maybe that's just making me paranoid. There, see? I told you we're going the right way. That must be Cloud Cap Inn, exclaimed Ken. As I stumbled over the hill, I saw what appeared to me as an abandoned shack in the middle of the forest. I don't think that's it, I yell, but Ken was already sprinting towards the front door. I call first shower, he yells as he enters the doors. I approach the building cautiously, examining the weathered cedar shakes, the broken shutters hanging from the windows. How is this place still in business? I thought. I push open the heavy oak door, and inside the place looks immaculate. It's an open floor plan with 2 massive fireplaces at either side of the room. The carpet covers the hardwood floor, and drapes cover the windows. I look to the front desk. It's the man from my dream. I told you to run, he says as a loud bang comes from the room upstairs. Kenny screams, bang! Then silence. I run as fast as I can up the stairs, skipping 4 steps at a time. I take a left. The hallway goes on forever. Which room did it come from? Kenny! I yell as I'm racing down the hallway. I hear no response. Kenny! Again, nothing. I ran downstairs, and there's no one around. The doors are locked, and I can't get out. I try for a window, but they're boarded up from the inside. I ran back upstairs and tried those windows, but to no avail. I'm trapped. But how? Why? Just as I ask this, I hear a noise coming from the stairs. I turn around, and there I see it. Kenny's body, 2 gunshot wounds. It must feed, says a voice from the other end of the room. I turn to look. Gloria? Bang. My knee is on fire. I cry out in pain as the creature appears. I look into its bright yellow eyes, soulless and empty, its teeth big and sharp, lips stained with blood. Why Gloria? Because I love him, she says, as she points the gun straight at me, and he loves me. Bang! I fall to the ground. The world seems blurry. I see the smoke coming from the barrel of the Smith & Wesson. I see Kenny stand and take the gun from his aunt. Just as my eyes close for the final time, I should have ran The End, Angry Highway by Stephen Scott. Get the hell out of the way. Jerry made sure to honk twice at the fellow in the fast lane. The car moved over, slowly. He moved closer to the man's bumper and flashed his headlights. Come on, stupid jerk. David clutched his armrest, trying to hide his fright. Jerry, calm down. He sped past the car, glancing over at the elderly man. What? You siding with that idiot? He was blocking the passing lane. David, hoping to dodge the blunt words of Jerry, countered with a calm voice. Well, you're almost 15 over the limit. Jerry glared at David sternly. I'm the professional here. The trainee sighed, revealing his agitation. Do you want to ride with me or not? Not liking the hostile tone, David sighed. I just want to learn the procedures. Jerry set the steering wheel between his legs, reached inside the bag, and pulled out his hamburger. He ate it, then glanced at his newspaper. David somehow hid his panic, reached over, and took hold of the steering wheel. What the hell is wrong with you? Jerry asked through his bites. Just helping you out. I don't need your help. I do this all the time. David released his grip, fought his own irritation at Jerry's tone. David was the new guy and wanted a job, and certainly didn't want to piss off his trainer. He found a neutral subject. So how long does the route take you? Some days it's longer, Jerry said between chews. Some days I have to go to Weatherford or Mount Vernon. It depends on what the physicians in those towns need. It's pretty easy. I listen to the radio a lot. Eat when I need to. Take a dump when I need to. Seems like a lonely job. It can be. He put down the food and paper and braked as he approached a slow truck. The highway reduced to 2 lanes, taking away a safe way pass. Move it, jerk. It moved to the right slightly, but Jerry could not see around it. The truck slowed. Move over, dipshit. Jerry pushed on the horn heavily. I can't see. Although he saw a hill, he decided to go anyway. Pulling completely in the oncoming lane, he revved up the engine. A sports utility vehicle emerged in front of them. He sped up more, determined to get back over in front of the truck. The SUV slightly moved to the right while honking. Jerry accelerated his small pickup. Shit, David whispered. He clutched the handle above his window as everything in his chest froze into a block of ice. Jerry zipped back to his lane with seconds to spare. Hearing both trucks honk at him, he stuck one hand out the window and extended his finger. Jerks, he mumbled. David clutched his chest, breathing heavy. Jerry, you may have been doing this a long time and used to pulling stunts like that. If you want to play with your life, that's fine. But you're also playing with mine. What? It's their fault? The SUV or the truck should have pulled over or slowed down. There's no shoulder. Their argument was lost in a high-pitched sound. A glint flashed across the rearview mirror. It happened again. The noise and flashes increased, as if gaining on them. The unassuming SUV had donned lights and sirens. The flashing red lights from inside the cab looked angry, and the flashing headlights played a game of gotcha. Jerry cursed and slowly pulled over. The window slid into the door, and Jerry glanced back at the highway patrolman. License and registration, please. He handed both to the patrolman. You don't have anything better to do. The patrolman's head snapped up from examining the documents. Sir, wait here while I check on something. He rolled the window up to guard from the Texas heat. I can't believe this guy. I can't believe you, mumbled David. Both sat quiet, letting the air conditioning keep them cool. Eventually, the patrolman returned. Sir, you've had 2 moving violations in the last 18 months. I'm citing you for reckless driving and improper lane change. What? Jerry exclaimed. I can't believe this crap. Sir, according to my radar, you were doing more than 20 over the limit. You made a lane change with a solid yellow line and within a quarter mile of a hill. You endangered my life and the life of that trucker. I ought to throw this ticket away, Jerry said, while shaking it in the patrolman's face. I'd then have to cite you for littering. Drive safely, sir. Jerry rolled the window back up while putting the ticket in his visor pocket. With the window cracked, he had to get in the last word. Asshole. He stewed at the patrolman while driving away. As the sun set behind him, it seemed to cool his temper until they reached Fort Worth. Jerry stayed in the passing lane, honking at anyone traveling too slow and making abrupt lane changes. Almost to the office, he sailed through 2 red lights. He stopped when a car in front of him stopped for the traffic signal. As soon as the light turned green, Jerry honked. Move it, dipshit. It's green. Reaching the office, he took the documents inside and turned them into his boss. He showed David the proper techniques for checking the documents in and checking out for the day. So that's the life of a courier. What do you think? David stepped close and stared at Jerry angrily. I may be new here, but you were downright reckless and unprofessional today. I'm willing to keep this between you and me today. But if I ever hear of you acting like this again, or see it, I'll go straight to the offices about it. Jerry laughed when David turned and walked away. What does he know? I'm a good driver. I'm a professional. It was their fault. Pushing the accelerator hard, Jerry passed the slow driver. Jerk! he said while honking. Still angry about David's tirade from yesterday, Jerry tried to imagine how he could have handled the situation better. I should have told him I've been driving courier for 10 years, and he should keep his mouth shut, or I'll shut it for him. Or I could have told him to go to hell. Maybe I should have. His mind snapped to attention when seeing another slow-moving driver. Glancing at his speedometer, Jerry noticed he traveled nearly 90. What is today? Everyone drives slow today? Asshole! He yelled while passing the car. Hearing a horn, he saw the car in the oncoming lane. Accelerating, he zipped back into his lane with a few seconds to spare. A yawn deflated Jerry's ire. The sun started to drop in the western sky, taking away the gale force winds. For a split second, the beautiful orange glare took away his temper. The highway seemed lonelier today. He actually missed David in the car. Occasionally, he did train a new driver, which was something he enjoyed. His stomach moaned. Jerry sped faster, wanting to get to a restaurant in the next town, then drop off the last bit of pharmaceuticals, then head home. The car seemed relieved as well when the engine stopped. Stretching his back and arms, Jerry tried to awaken his stiff, atrophied muscles. Popping his joints, he looked forward to a nice meal. Sitting at his oirate booth, he did not even glance at the menu. The familiar waitress appeared. Somewhere between fit and heavy, she had aged gray eyes that had plenty of wisdom, but mostly from hearing stories. Her wrinkles disappeared in a smile, giving off a pleasant light. It was the typical small-town cafe waitress who had the friendly ear and subtle wisdom. Hi, Jerry. The usual? Hey, Diane. Yeah, the usual. How's the job? Boring as ever. Picking up piss, drugs, and lab tests. At least all the idiot drivers make it interesting. She smiled while filling out the ticket. It'll be out soon, hun. Jerry sighed, dreading the 2-hour drive back to Fort Worth. Damn dipshit drivers. Not all idiots. Jerry looked at the old man who sat in the booth next to him. Was he there before? They all can't be idiots. Grandpa said, if you meet one idiot a day, you met an idiot. If everyone you meet is an idiot, you may be the idiot. He was right, you know. Anger's no good. It leads to prisons and a terrible lot in life. The darkness almost hid the distinguished wrinkles and tired eyes. A red, faded ball cap had Stan's Trucking stenciled on it. I used to be on the giving end of anger. Now I receive it. Constantly. Perplexed, Jerry wondered why a man whose voice had so much wisdom also dripped with sadness. It's a lonely life, the man said, but it's my lot. I'll take it, though I hate it. Jerry hunched his shoulders. Hate what? Ever since... The man shook his head, unable to finish his sentence. Jerry stood and glanced outside. noticing the large, black truck. "That yours?" asked Jerry. The old man nodded lightly. "Yep, been driving it for years. I hope someday someone can take my place." Jerry stood, wanting to get away from the bizarre old man. He rushed to the bathroom, washed his hands, then returned for dinner. "Good," Jerry mumbled, glad the old man had left. Glancing out the window, the truck was also gone. The waitress finally returned with dinner. "So, Diane, what's with the old coot who was in that booth?" Debbie narrowed her eyelids. "Old man? The one in that booth there," Jerry said, pointing at it. Debbie put her hands on her hips. "I haven't sat anyone in that booth tonight." Jerry looked towards the other booth, wondering if he perceived the sitting arrangement correctly. No. A woman and her child sat there, and he remembered them. He pointed outside. Remember, his cap said, "Stan's Trucking." "Wait a minute," she said disdainfully. "The old man with the Stan's Trucking ball cap?" Jerry nodded, finally taking a bite of his steak. Her voice changed, with a mixture of eeriness and joviality. "Ooh, honey, you've seen a ghost." "I don't believe in ghosts. Legend has it, a guy named Stan disappeared on this highway about 20 years ago. His truck had this route to Abilene, but truck and driver disappeared. No one ever found him or his truck." Jerry shook his head. "No way. The guy was here. Probably a new guy for Stan's Trucking." "Well, if he was here," said Debbie, "he stiffed a check and my tip. And I didn't have to bus the table." Jerry shook his head while finishing his meal. A large semi sped by, spreading the dry Texas dirt behind it, along with the carbon monoxide. Jerry coughed. Wiggling his keys, Jerry unlocked his small pickup and got in. The last delivery. Finally, he could go home. 2 more hours, then a weekend of rest and recreation awaited him. His wheels launched him onto the lonely, dark highway. Darkness spread in front of him, while the sun's light faded behind him. Jerry's eyelids felt heavy. Too much to eat, he thought. He slapped himself and turned on the radio, trying to wake himself. After singing a few bars, he yawned, preventing any distinguishable lyrics. Quickly, he switched it over to a talk radio station, hoping the host might stir some thought to stay awake. No. The eyelids tried to shut. He jerked his head up and opened his eyes wide. As soon as he finished, they tried to shut again. He snapped his head to attention, hoping to stave off sleep. The right side of his truck vibrated heavily, jarring him awake. Quickly, he pulled off the rumble strip and back into the lane. Shaking his head, he remembered a rest stop about 40 miles down the highway. He hoped to make it. His head dropped again. Jerry's eyes blurred. As his vision narrowed, his mind relaxed, anticipating blissful sleep. Almost there, unable to fight it, his eyes closed. A loud honking noise jolted Jerry awake. Cursing, he pulled his head up and cursed loudly. What the? Headlights closed in. Too bright and too close. They almost blinded him. Back off, jerk. Fully awake now, Jerry saw his speed near 85. The vehicle behind him closed the gap. Able to flip the rearview mirror, he sped up, trying to gain some distance. The truck continued to remain close, as if taunting him. I said, Jerry said, while tapping the brakes. Back off. The loud horn almost hurt his ears. It sounded 3 or 4 times. The truck closed the gap again. What the? Jerry said, while flipping off the driver. He hoped the driver of the vehicle could see him. The loud honking started again, jarring Jerry's eardrums. He wanted to cover his ears, but he feared taking both hands off the steering wheel with this maniac behind him. Seeing the small shoulder, Jerry pulled to the right. He ignored the annoying vibrations from the shoulder grooves. Okay, he said, while slowing down. Go ahead and get around me. The vehicle also pulled over, maintaining a close distance to Jerry's bumper. What the? He glanced ahead, seeing nothing in the oncoming lane. It's clear, you idiot. Get around me. The horn resounded again, bellowing louder, as if releasing anger or sheer malevolence. Suddenly, an empty feeling tried to drag his chest down. Sensing harm as the driver's intent scared him, an ominous dread filled his chest. Jerry moved to the empty oncoming lane, hoping the driver would pass him. The truck followed every move. In fact, now it seemed as if the vehicle moved to make sure and get its bright lights into the side rear view mirrors. Damn it, Jerry yelled. What the hell is your problem? He moved back to the correct lane, only to be followed again. Defenseless, Jerry felt nervous and outmatched. Whatever vehicle stalked him, he could tell it was at least 2 or 3 feet higher, like an SUV or oversized pickup. The driver pulled alongside Jerry and flashed its lights at him. It honked again, startling him. You goddamned idiot, he yelled while rolling down his window. You're gonna kill... His voice trailed. The dread froze his mind as he recognized the large black truck from the diner. He barely caught the license plate. EVL 666. Jerry might laugh, but he panicked and hit his brakes hard as the truck swerved in front of him, flashed its brake lights for a second, then sped up. The black truck blended with the night. Brake lights revealed its presence again. Jerry veered to the right while hitting his brakes. This time, all tires left the pavement, and his small truck rolled across the plains. Tumbleweeds and tall grass slammed into his grill and thumped the hood. He crashed through a small wooden fence. Scared, he slowed more. A cow appeared in his lights. Veering hard to the right, Jerry barely missed it. Some trees appeared. Panicked, Jerry pushed the brake all the way to the floor. His truck jolted to a stop. Jerry's chest slapped the steering wheel, while papers, pens, and trash all snapped forward. Dust rolled into his cab, trying to choke his throat and invade his eyes. Even though the air conditioner poured cold air on his face, sweat beaded down his forehead and made his palms slick. He quivered, actually fearing for his life. Nearly 200 yards away, the black truck waited on the shoulder. Dust outlined its bright headlights. Jerry stared at the monster, forgetting his fear and forging hatred. Furious, he grabbed his steel flashlight. Clutching it tightly, he imagined pounding the driver's head until it turned into a bloody pulp. "You goddamn jerk," he said, while gaining anger with every step. "Get out of the truck!" The horn sounded, slightly startling him. "I said, get out of the truck," he said, while hitting the hood with his flashlight. The horn wailed again. "I said," Jerry said, reaching for the door. "Get out of..." The door opened. Fiery eyes leapt at Jerry. The mouth, lined with disfigured, randomly sharpened teeth, howled loudly. Cold, shadowy arms extended and tried to grab him. Jerry slammed the door and fell backwards. Panicked, he jumped up and rushed back to his truck. The shrill horn sounded again, leaving behind a cold, dreaded fright. In a full run, he got back to his car, slammed the door shut, and rolled up the window. "You can't get away from him." Jerry shined the light at the old man. "What the? Who are you? What's going on?" The old man looked as if he was about to cry. "I'm sorry, but he's letting me go, and he needs a new driver." "Get the hell out!" Jerry screamed, while trying to push the old man out of the truck. More confused than scared, Jerry stopped trying to extract the man. "What are you talking about? I thought you were..." An invisible vice clamped on Jerry's neck. Feeling like cold steel, the touch robbed the warmth in his body. In his rear-view mirror, he saw it. The monster's disfigured face looked as if it had been burned. Its eyes alternated between a hollow, black color and a fiery red anger. Its large mouth stretched wide, emanating a deadly hiss. "So long, young fellow. You'll learn, just as I did." Jerry tried to reach for the old man's help. Ignored, he struggled against the powerful, cold grip. It clamped tighter. Soon, everything blurred, then went dark. David stared at the long, forgotten highway while yawning. The road stretched endlessly, fading into a blur in the far distance. Soon, the sun started to recede behind him, trying to blind him in the mirrors. The empty miles obstructed his journey back to Fort Worth. David wondered what happened to Jerry. He was last seen at a cafe several miles back, Then he disappeared. The highway patrol could not find him, nor his truck. David snapped awake as he approached a black pickup truck. It traveled too slow. Needing to get around it, David moved to the left. Unable to see very well, David lightly tapped his horn. The truck moved to the right. Then he zipped around it. "Move it, dummy!" Jerry stared into the distance as the small pickup got around him. Tired, he wanted to sleep. Depressed, he wanted to cry. Hungry, he longed for food. His passenger, though, enjoyed making him listen to everyone who passed him. "Jerk! Idiot! You damn fool! Get the hell out of the way!" Every insult echoed perfectly in Jerry's ears. Wing woman. God, I hate flying. I look out the window of the 747, so foolishly boarded in my rush to get cross-country as quickly as possible. We are flying through some dark clouds, so there is little to see. The old, familiar fear rises in the pit of my stomach as I try to push it back. I have to maintain myself. Don't start to panic. Nothing's going to happen. I try to flood myself with calm, even as I'm white-knuckling the armrest. The 4 Jack Daniels I had before the flight aren't working. The plane is shaking a little bit. I get it. I am a nervous flyer myself. The stranger next to me smiles reassuringly, but her voice doesn't sound nervous at all. I never liked it and avoid it whenever I can. Cars or buses are safer. She chuckles. You do know that's not what they say. Who says? The experts, of course. You can't trust them. What makes them experts anyway? My face feels raw and flushed. Am I turning red? Well, they say flying is much safer than driving. Thousands dead every year from cars, but no fatal plane crashes in the United States for several years now. She's trying to calm me, but I've heard it all before. Don't believe a word. I know. I've heard all of that. But it just takes one plane to crash, and over 100 dead, just like that. What if it's this plane? I can feel it shaking. Is my voice trembling? I don't want her to notice and think I'm a coward. Hell, I am afraid. It's embarrassing for her to see it. Her face shows concern. Or is it contempt? I'm not sure. She's middle-aged, but still in good shape. And pretty. It's all right. Don't worry. Planes do all kinds of different things in flight. A little shaking is perfectly normal. I fly quite a bit, and no, you must think me a real loser for being so frightened, and you're so calm. Oh, I'm not calm, just a good actress. She teases. What's your name? Charles? But my friends call me Charlie. Well, Charlie, I'm Rachel. But my friends call me Rachel. She smiles and extends a slender hand because my hand is sweaty and a little shaky. I hesitate momentarily to return her handshake, but overcome my reluctance. She doesn't seem to notice or care about the condition of my hand. Where are you headed? I ask. To Dallas. I have a job in marketing, so I do a fair amount of traveling. but I still understand the nervousness. Never feel quite calm till the plane touches down and stops moving. I can't tell you are nervous at all. Like I said, Charlie, I'm good at acting the part of a calm, cool, and in control flyer. Perfected the part, you might say. How about you? Where you headed? Family crisis. My mom is in bad shape, and I have to head to a small town about 100 miles outside of Dallas and get there quickly. Otherwise, I'd never be on this death trap. I smile, trying to make a little joke of my fear. Sorry to hear that, Charlie. I hope she gets well soon. So do I. But the doctors say the odds are against her. So this might be my last visit. I have to tell myself that as long as there is life, there's hope. God, I'm sorry. I lost my father about a year ago. It's horrible to go through. Our conversation is interrupted by a few particularly bigger bumps than the previous ones. After the shaking stops, her demeanor seems to change, and she sounds a little different when she resumes talking. Charlie, I feel bad for you. Not only are you having to deal with your mom's illness, but then you have to brave this shaky flight. I thought you said a little shaking was normal. Well, a little shaking at times is normal. She gets a little closer to me and lowers her voice a bit. However, to be truthful, this flight is a little more bouncy than usual. But I'm still not that concerned yet. What happened to projecting the fearless businesswoman? My fear level is rising again. Sorry. I guess I just feel more comfortable with you. I usually sit next to people who are totally fearless. They will hide stoically through the bumpiest of flights, showing no emotion, while I am churning inside, but still projecting my calm exterior. But with you, I can be real. It's liberating. Her slightly moist hand finds mine and squeezes it slightly. It's comforting to have a fellow passenger reveal her inner anxiety to me. We are companions in fear, friends of anxiety. Don't worry. It's nice to know I'm not the only one. Sometimes I feel that I can't even talk about it without people giving me all the statistics about how safe flying is and how foolish my concerns. I smile at her. Our inside joke. She softly laughs. You got me, Charlie. I was overcompensating, I guess. What can I say? Hope you don't think I am a pure hypocrite. Hypocrite? Heaven forbid. Just a good actress. Oh my, Charlie. Flattery will get you everywhere, she bravely says, but her hand pressure gives her away. More ups and downs, and more bumping now. Worse than anything before it. Quickly, the fasten seat belt's lamp comes on, and the captain's voice comes over the loudspeaker, telling us we are experiencing a little unexpected turbulence, but there is nothing to worry about. Talk about acting. Do these guys train in how to project a confident and reassuring voice? Or what? I'm not believing him at all. There's got to be something wrong. Otherwise, why the seatbelt light and message from the captain? Why the ever-increasing bumping? The engines don't sound right at all. This isn't how engines should sound. Are they cutting out? Losing power? Are we losing altitude? I look over at Rachel. There is fear in her face now. Our sweaty hands are in a death grip. I'm so glad she's here with me. I met Death last night, being alone in one of London's many streets. I was already cold, but his presence behind me was more than that. It was ice. Sharp, hard ice that seared through my flesh, traveled through my blood, urging goosebumps to shoot out of my skin. When I turned down the lonely alley, I regretted it instantly. It was said that he lingered in dark streets, waiting for a desperate soul to pass him by. But still, I had decided to keep going. Arriving in London on the night of my sister's birthday was already fine. But her party had begun at 8 p.m., and I didn't need to look at my watch to know that it was way past that already. She would kill me for being late. So late. But that wasn't the only reason I dared not turn back. It had been too long since I'd last walked these streets. Since I'd last felt the heavy air of London pressing down on me, clogging my lungs with soot and smoke. Life on the road had made me lighter, more restless. But coming back here was like stepping into a grave. The city had a way of sinking its teeth into you, of making you forget where you'd been and why you'd left. Fearing death was childish. My parents had told me as such when I refused to go on one of the rides at the festival extravaganza during our trip to America. But this was different. Like the images in my mind of falling from great heights and being trampled by horses had cleared, revealing something so impossible that it was the only thing my mind deemed plausible. He was behind me. I did not turn around. I did not blink. My eyes remained open, forgetting how dry they had become. I just stood there, an invisible force stopping my feet from taking off into a run, from sprinting around corners and through streets until he would inevitably catch me. I wondered what it would feel like. A sudden pain in my chest, a fog corrupting my mind. My vision slowly dimmed until I drifted off into a never-ending, dreamless sleep. Or maybe I would feel nothing. Maybe I would be awake 1 second, thinking of all the ways I was going to die, and the next I would be lying on the ground, waiting for someone to find me. Although by then, it would be too late. No one could ever be saved. The goosebumps grew larger as his presence sauntered towards me, like prey waiting for the predator, knowing that it was neither fast enough nor strong enough to face it. I thought about all those moments I had let slip through my fingers, all those opportunities I had missed out on, all those potential friends, and more that I had hung back from, thinking that I wasn't worth their time. Now, I thought that I should have chosen who was worth my time, for it was going to be shorter than anyone would have expected. And who would have blamed them for thinking I had all the time in the world? I always thought, never did. Always calculated, never acted. Always worried about others, and never spared a thought for myself. Now, just like then, I waited. He was as silent as the night. The once cawing crows and hissing cats were already in mourning. He stood right behind me, dark as a shadow. His breath, a gentle breeze against my neck. The single word spoken in a voice rich in charm, alluring me to turn around, to face the predator, but I did not turn around. Still, I did not blink. The feeling in my fingers came back, and I was met with the warmth of coming out of an ice bath into the blazing sun. My feet began to move, the invisible force gone like it was never there. And soon I was running through winding streets, trying to think of anything but what had just happened. I'm late, I thought. I'm so late, and my sister will be mad. I tried to convince myself that was why I was running. Nothing happened. I saw nothing. My breath tore through the night's air as my book struck the slick cobblestones. Gas lamps fought against the choking fog, blinding me. The stray hairs that I had forgotten to shave on my arms stood up as ice invaded my lungs once more. No, please no. I had heard people talk about terror whipping through them, causing them to panic and shake. But that was a lie. Terror didn't come all at once. It came in waves, each one bigger than the last, freezing my lungs and clenching my throat in a vice-like grip. Why did I think that I could outrun him? Why did I think I could outrun the inevitable? I looked down at my pale skirts, now splattered in mud, and refused to look up again. The shock of what I might see would kill me before he did. He made no sound as he approached for the second time. No footsteps, no shift of breath or fabric. Just the sudden, certain sense of him standing before me. Close, too close. My eyes stayed down. I could feel him watching me, the weight of his gaze pressing against my skin like the brush of fingertips. My breath hitched. My fingers curled into the folds of my dress. He said nothing. He did nothing. Just stood there, silent and motionless. The seconds stretched and broke. My pulse thudded in my throat, like the fear in my stomach, mixing with something warmer, darker beneath my ribs. I imagined what his eyes must have been like. Dark, unblinking, tracing the line of my collarbone and the curve of my mouth. Then, just as quietly as he had come, he left for the second time in a single hour. Slowly, cautiously, I dared to lift my head. The street was empty again, mist curling through the dim light. I waited for what might have been seconds or minutes. I didn't know. But I managed to walk again. But I didn't run. I no longer cared that I was late. Finally, I reached it. A tall iron gate, its surface slick with rain that I hadn't realized was falling. A footman in a crisp coat stood at attention beneath a gaslight's feeble glow, his face blank under the brim of his hat. His eyes sharpened when he saw me. Without a word, he pushed the gate open, allowing me to slip through. The moment the gate clicked shut behind me, the street's grim chill seemed to dissolve. A long, white, gravel path wound through manicured gardens, lit by golden candles and strung by iron posts. Tall windows loomed over me as music floated through the air. As soon as I made it into the house, I passed the polished wood and gilded mirrors, up the stairs to the spare bedroom where I flopped onto the well-made bed, ignoring the state of my clothes. Did I feel bad for leaving my sister on her birthday? Of course, but I just couldn't cope with anyone or anything. I didn't think I could even fall asleep, no matter how much my body craved it. I had spent so long moving from place to place, never staying long enough to leave a mark, never bothering to make ties. I told myself it was because I liked the freedom, the open road, the thrill of waking up in a new city with new faces. But the truth was simpler. It was easier not to care when you knew you wouldn't stay long enough to lose anything. I met death last night, and I lived, master of puppets. Io sono il padrone, e tu sei il burattino. I am the master, and you are the puppet. Working in an antique store was hardly where Aislinn saw herself 5 years ago. But beggars couldn't be choosers in this economy. Her dreams of becoming someone had been crushed by the reality of life and the collapse of her support system after college, and she depended on this job to make ends meet. Still, something was charming about the Raven's wares, even if she did encounter some characters from time to time. Her cousin often asked her if she had ever felt spirits or weird energy working around the real skulls, the old Victorian dolls, or the taxidermy of the Raven that gave the store its name. Like everyone in the town, Aislinn had heard horror stories about the objects sold from this place. A man bought a doll for his daughter, and they all vanished without a trace a week later. A woman bought a pretty ring and died in a freak accident with the ring on her finger. Someone bought an old statue and fell down their stairs. The truth was, Aislinn didn't believe in those sorts of things. Ghosts, ghouls, or energies. Sure, the place was creepy if you worked late alone on long winter nights, but it paid the bills. Those horror stories were coincidences. Plenty of people had purchased items from the Raven's wrath without an issue. Her cousin believed in that side of things so strongly. People whispered about her behind their hands. If Aislinn started believing, what would they say about their family? It was bad enough she worked here. The customers you never heard about were outsiders. A tiny voice in her head would whisper when she had this argument with herself. You've never followed up to check on what happened afterwards. She looked up from her phone when Eli barged their way back through the piles of antique junk piled around the place. A guy dropped off this painting today. I'm telling you, it's weird. Aislinn knew that everything here was weird in one form or another. She once had someone try to offer a jar of real human teeth. That had been on her second day, and regrettably, it had not been her last strange experience. They jerked their thumb over their shoulder. It's out the back by the rocking horse. I need you to label it up before you leave tonight. Did he give any details? Nah, I'm surprised you didn't see him. Dark-haired guy, glasses, had some sort of accent. She vaguely recalled someone coming in of that description when she'd been restocking some old hardbacks and had directed him towards Eli at the back of the store. She wouldn't have thought of him again, save for the odd look in his dark eyes. I sent him to the back to see you. He had this look in his eyes, like he'd seen things, you know? I offered him a fair price, but he didn't even want the money. He just said to take it. He didn't want money? Aislinn repeated slowly. That's a bit weird, don't you think? Maybe it came with bad memories or something. Eli shrugged. Just make sure to get it cataloged to go out on display. I've got to head off. I'll see you tomorrow. The afternoon was quickly fading, the air becoming colder and far less welcoming inside. The eyes of the Raven on the desk seemed to watch her every move, and the gentle ticking of the antique clocks suddenly felt ominous. Even the shadows of the shelves seemed to be lengthening, reaching out in her direction. Aislinn looked up from her book and paused. The store had fallen eerily silent. She felt her heartbeat increase as the hair at the back of her neck stood up. Hello? Why was she calling out? There was no one there. No one had entered the shop. The bell above the door had been silent for hours. A faint whisper seemed to be coming from the distance. Someone must have left the radio on in the storage room. She walked to the back of the store, trying to ignore the feeling that the eyes of the dolls were watching her. It wasn't like her to be this paranoid. She pushed the door open wide and reached in to grab the portable radio the manager insisted on keeping around. Her hand found the handle and lifted it out. It was switched off. Okay, she muttered, feeling a cold trickle of sweat run down her back. She set the radio down on an empty stool and worked away around the mountains of antiques to find the latest addition to the collection. Aislinn pulled the sheet off slowly and recoiled. The painting was of a hanging puppet, clearly based on the original Pinocchio story. It's dressed in traditional clothes against a gruesome backdrop of bones and the occasional skull. The entire thing was bordered by a swirling wine-red, blood red. A shudder ran down her spine as she took in all the gruesome details. The glass on the front was cracked, but that was hardly anything they couldn't fix. There was something odd about the break, something she couldn't quite put her finger on. She turned the painting over to check the back of the frame and noticed a faded name on the back, too illegible to read, and an unmistakable bloody handprint. What the hell? The painting clattered to the floor as she reeled back, banging into a cabinet and screaming as the puppet hanging there swung into her face. Its painted smile seemed twisted into a cruel leer as she swatted it away, clutching at her chest. She took some calming breaths. She picked the painting up from the floor with shaking hands and turned it over, aware of her heart racing in her chest. There's no bloody handprint, only the faded marks of a name. You're going mad, she muttered to herself. You need to get out more. She carried the painting to the desk and started cataloging it, intrigued by the lack of an artist's mark. Even a quick Google search yielded no results, and after a few minutes, she brought it back to sit at the back by the dolls and puppets. She took a moment longer to stare at it and turned back to the front. There was a rocking horse in the middle of the aisle. No, that wasn't possible. She hadn't moved anything. Hello? She called out nervously. This isn't funny now. Come out. When no one answered, she tried to focus. Maybe it had been there before, and she had simply walked past it, not noticing. Eli had said the painting was out the back by the rocking horse. For a moment, her cousin's voice echoed in her ear. Though she tried to deny it, this was not the first time something like this had happened on her shift. Eli had laughed it off with her at the time, but she hadn't seen a bloody handprint last time. Eli had moved the horse. That's all there was to it. Aishlin walked back to the front of the store and stared out at the street, across at the ordinary sight of the small local shop and the dress shop beside it. Maybe she needed a holiday. The radio started playing a Cure song. Had she turned it on? When had she brought it to the front? Suddenly, the dark shop seemed alien to her. No, now she was being stupid. She didn't believe in any of that stuff. A sudden tiredness overcame her as she sat back in her chair and started to doze, watching the cuckoo bird on the antique clock swing backwards and forwards, swinging. She could hear the distant creaking sound of a rope and sobbing cries, growing louder and louder. Oh, how painful, how painful. Why wasn't I good? Something was hovering in the corner of her vision. Every instinct in her body screamed at her not to turn and look, to run away from that shadow. She turned her head and saw the puppet from the painting. It raised its head and leered at her. Puppets have no soul, but they do a lot of harm. Suddenly, she was the one battling with the rope as the puppet laughed and screeched over and over. I want to be real. I want to be real. I want to be real. Aisling leapt up from her sleep, feeling the phantom rope around her throat. Every item in the shop was facing her. They seemed to be looming towards her, skulls echoing the cries of the horrific voice as it cried out over and over. Whatever sick joke this was, she wasn't playing anymore. She ran to the door and tried to haul it open. It was locked. The room seemed to darken, and the sound of the puppet's voice, distant at first, became unmistakable, growing clearer with each passing second. Its whispers now unmistakably directed at her. "Oh, che male." She picked up a metal poker and walked to where the painting sat. The voice was louder now, its desperate cries in both English and Italian piercing her ears. "What the hell are you?" The voices paused. "You should let me out. You're just like me. You're a puppet too." Aisling lifted the metal poker above her head. "What are you?" "You should let me out, Aisling." She tried to move away, but her back smacked into a large cabinet. "What the hell are you?" My last puppet didn't obey. He brought me here. Un burattino che non obbedisce finisce sempre male. A puppet who does not obey always ends badly. You should let me out. I've always been here, waiting for someone to let me out. She realized then what was wrong with the glass. Someone, something, was trying to break free from the inside. Her own reflection in the glass warped into a puppet's face, and she felt the weight of something choking her. No, she was not a puppet. She was a human. This wasn't real. I am the master of puppets. Puppets have no soul, but they do a lot of harm. I tried to take his soul, but he broke free. You will let me out. You are my puppet now. You saw it in the glass. You're like me. Aisling watched in horror as the cracks in the glass grew wider. It will end badly for you if you do not obey. She lifted the poker to swing it, and the hands of the puppets on display reached out and grabbed her throat, pulling her backwards. A bad puppet is of no use to me. I have been waiting for you. There's nothing to be done. One must really die good. Aisling screamed, trying to throw the puppets off. She twisted in their grip, seeing the cracks grow wider and wider. When you're not real, nothing hurts, Aisling. But the more I try to be real, the more I feel pain. Oh, the pain. How painful this is. Can't you feel it? The creaking of the rope was unbearable. The spiraling voice wailing and wailing as she begged for this to stop, for her to wake up, to let this nightmare end. Aisling woke in her chair. The clock read the same time as it had before, but something was different. Everything was different. At some point, the gentle light of the afternoon had faded into a gray gloom bordering on darkness. This day seemed to be lasting an eternity. It was all a nightmare, a terrible nightmare. She saw it then. Her vision narrowed, and her chest tightened as she stared at it. The painting mocking her from the back, as it always had. Maybe this was still a nightmare taken new form. Those horrible skulls leering at her, that noise, that endless noise. She approached it slowly and ran her hands over the cracks in the glass, feeling her skin crawl with revulsion. The glass was cold, unnaturally cold, like it was sucking the little warmth she had left from her fingers. "I want to be real, Aislinn." A voice whispered in her ear, "You should let me out. I have waited so long." She grabbed the poker from where it lay on the ground and lifted it, bringing it down to strike the glass. A gloved hand reached out of the frame and snatched hold of her wrist, forcing her to drop the poker in shock. A puppet has no soul, but it can do harm. It cackled, drawing her closer to the frame. "You're my puppet now. Your soul is mine." "No!" she screamed, grabbing at the nearest object, a porcelain bird, and throwing it at the puppet. "You aren't real. None of this is real." She felt the world begin to blur and tried to pull away from its grip. But it was too late. This couldn't be it. This couldn't be how this ended for her. This wasn't fair. This wasn't fair. "You aren't real," she cried as her mind began to break. "You aren't real." She felt the rancid breath of the puppet as it whispered in her ear, "And now neither are you." The yellow truck. "Man, $6 for an ice cream sandwich? Highway robbery." Jack squinted at the menu, slapped crookedly on the side of the bright yellow panel truck. Perry's ice cream. Everyone had a restaurant on wheels these days. Knockoffs of famous characters grinned back at him with their dead eyes. He knew the actual products would be a deformed, melted version of the picture, and he found the irregular eyeballs and melting smiles to be unsettling. A nice, plain ice cream sandwich would hit the spot. "Excuse me." "Hello." Though the sliding sales window was open, Jack saw no sign of a vendor, even though the speakers puked out a chiptune version of La Cucaracha at top volume. "Are you going to take my money or what?" The chill from the freezers seeped out from the window. Jack leaned in a little further, noting the container of ice cream sandwiches that could be easily opened from his vantage point. He looked as far into the truck as he could see, then checked over his shoulder to see if he had an audience. The neighbors could be so nosy. With no one in sight, Jack quickly snaked his hand into the window, opened the container, and grabbed hold of a coveted ice cream sandwich. "Should have been doing your job, ice cream man," he mumbled as he walked back to his house, mouth full of ice cream and perfectly soggy cookie. He casually tossed the wrapper into his neighbor Mrs. Crowley's yard. Mrs. Crowley was the sort of woman everyone assumed was a witch, and the local kids would egg her house each Halloween and dare each other to ring her doorbell and run. She was probably a very nice lady, but Jack didn't care enough to do anything about it. The yellow truck sat on the street outside Jack's house for hours, rotating through its jaunty but very limited playlist, which, Jack noted, recycled La Cucaracha far more than was probably necessary. Jack considered calling the police, but with his record, and at least one warrant out for his arrest, he didn't want to call any attention to himself. Still, he was surprised that no one else in the neighborhood seemed to have called. In fact, no one else in the neighborhood even seemed to pay the truck any mind. The sky eventually darkened, and the street lights buzzed on. And finally, the truck shut off its pixelated musical loop and trundled away. As night settled in, Jack, not wanting to lose the sweet and ill-begotten taste of ice cream from his lips, didn't bother to brush his teeth before crawling into bed. His leg was missing. Jack searched around the house, tossing couch cushions and overturning tables, flinging plates and mugs from his kitchen cabinets, even checking behind the toilet just in case. But no leg. He licked his lips, tasting the smooth vanilla cream from his earlier treat. Jack's brain fought to make a connection between the ice cream sandwich and his missing leg, but the thoughts were foggy and nebulous. The opening notes of La Cucaracha floated into the room. Jack launched upward, sweat pouring from his face as he shook off the nightmare. He tasted the residue of the ice cream on his lips, then flung the clammy sheets off his body to make sure his leg was, in fact, still there. La Cucaracha played in the distance, just audible through his open window. At first, Jack was able to dismiss the music as a memory echo from earlier. But the music grew louder. He lurched out of bed and towards the window, stopping to wrap his robe around himself so the neighbors wouldn't get a peek at his genitals if they happened to be awake, and also looking directly at his house. The familiar yellow panel truck was slowly turning onto his street, music playing at a volume just loud enough for him to hear clearly, but still retain a dreamlike quality. Jack had the strangest feeling. The headlights were aimed directly at him as the truck crept towards his house, an inching pace that was almost sinister. It was far too dark to see if a driver was present this time, but Jack assumed there was one. Jack shut the window, muting the noise just a touch, and tried to get back to sleep. The song slithered into his ears and brain, worming around and preventing him from falling back to sleep. He promised himself that he would give the driver a stern talking to in the morning if the truck were still parked outside his house. As the sun started to peak over the horizon, the music finally died down, and Jack stood in the window, watching the panel truck slowly crawl down the street. He hadn't bothered to grab his robe this time, but the fog of sleeplessness had settled over his brain. More than 1 cup of bitter, black coffee was necessary to get him ready for the ride to work. Slower reactions would make the commute more dangerous, he thought, snapping on his bike helmet. He cursed his revoked driver's license, unsteadily mounted the bike, and started pedaling. At each red light, Jack took a generous swig out of his travel mug, and by the time he sat down at his desk, he was wired. The sheer amount of coffee he drank that morning had agitated Jack's stomach, so he was looking forward to having solid food by the time noon rolled around. A little something to absorb all that coffee. He walked to his favorite sandwich shop, a tiny hole in the wall, a block or so down from his office. It was a checkered tablecloth affair, plus an easily accessible tip jar and an oblivious cashier, so he almost always broke even. The welcome bell chimed merrily as Jack opened the door, but the chimes didn't stop when the door closed. He paused, listening, then realized the notes formed a song. La cucaracha increased in volume, steadily, and Jack was too busy frowning at the noise to notice when the hostess greeted him. Sorry. Table for one, he told her, and she walked him to a booth by the window. Jack started to sit, but realized he could see the bright yellow panel truck pull awkwardly into the parallel parking spot directly in front of the diner. He sprang back, an odd fear clawing at his chest. Maybe a different table, he said. The hostess shrugged and pointed him to a table near the kitchen. Jack slumped down in a chair that still let him see out the window. The menu, still as maddeningly crooked as before, was fully visible from this vantage point. And Jack noted that though the sales window was open, no one was manning the counter. So Jack couldn't shake the feeling of being watched as he ordered his lunch, chewed, drank, wiped his mouth with his flimsy paper napkin, paid at the counter, helped himself to the tip jar, and walked out the door. Every move soundtracked by the tinny tunes pumping out of the truck's speaker. No one had approached the counter to buy an ice cream the entire lunch hour. His muscles relaxed as he walked back to his building. The more the music faded with distance, the better he felt. He hadn't even noticed he was so tense. Jack rolled his neck around, rotated his shoulders, and was just about to reach the automatic doors to his office when he heard it again. The 8-bit notes of La Cucaracha increased in volume behind him, and he swung around, fists raised and heart beating rapidly. His boss, who had been walking up immediately behind him, backed up. Whoa! Whoa! Jack. Treating Jack like a panicked horse had, presumably, his boss's desired effect. And Jack put his fists down. What's got you all spooked? Bad sandwich? His boss chuckled, and then breezed past Jack into the office. Still on the sidewalk, Jack caught a flash of yellow down the block. He didn't wait to see the truck this time, and rushed inside. Jack was waiting, rather impatiently, to cross the street on his way home when a shiver ran up his spine. He looked over his shoulder, and his stomach seized. The yellow ice cream truck was also in line at the stoplight, just 3 car lengths away. It wasn't playing the music, but Jack thought he could hear it all the same. Jack wasn't completely sure that the truck was following him, specifically as he cycled through the neighborhood. But with each turn, he became more and more convinced. The truck kept a slow speed and stayed a modest distance behind his bike, far lower than the posted speed limit. He stopped at the cluster mailbox at the top of his street, mostly to check the mail, but also to see if the ice cream truck would keep driving. The truck slowed to a halt a few yards from the mailboxes, the staccato sounds still aggressively worming its way into Jack's brain. Jack fiddled with the mailbox key and took an unnecessary amount of time inspecting each piece of mail, even the junk. But the ice cream truck still didn't move, and Jack stared directly at the driver's side of the windshield. It was so tinted that he was still unable to tell if anyone was in the driver's seat at all. He flipped the bird, just in case, and got back on his bike. As he started pedaling the short distance to his house, the truck started following again, a few houses down from his own. Jack heard the truck accelerate. His heart thumping, he quickly looked back to confirm that, yes, the ice cream truck was speeding up and heading his way. He checked his surroundings for a safe place to duck behind, but only Mrs. Crowley's rose bushes offered any sort of protection. He darted towards the bushes, abandoning his bike and hurling himself into the roses in one semi-graceful movement that would have made a movie stuntman proud. The thorns bit into his skin, and one scratched dangerously close to his left eye. The truck had missed him, but Jack heard the screech of brakes. Jack painfully extricated himself from the rose bushes, and the ice cream truck still idled in the road. La cucaracha, blaring incessantly. The back door of the truck swung open with a creak. "Hey!" Jack yelled, wiping blood from his face, only to realize he also had blood on his hands and lots of other places because of the thorns. He lurched towards the back of the truck, his left leg dragging slightly. It would be bruised in the morning, he thought. "Hey, I'm talking to you, asshole!" Jack rounded the back of the truck and leaned on the open door. No one was inside. Through a narrow break in the curtains, Mrs. Crowley observed Jack as he yelled at the ice cream truck. He had always been an odd duck, that Jack. Terribly messy. And just the other day, he had been standing at his window in the middle of the night with only a robe on. She had almost seen his genitals. Mrs. Crowley couldn't make out exactly what Jack was yelling, but she imagined it was full of swearing. He started to lean into the open back of the truck, and then, in an instant, he was yanked inside. Before his legs made it all the way across the bumper, the doors of the truck slammed shut with such force that Jack's left leg was severed at the knee. The bloody leftovers dropped unceremoniously to the pavement and rolled to the curb, high-pitched notes of La Cucaracha distorted with static, and the truck shuddered violently. Mrs. Crowley took a tiny sip of her tea and watched the menu sign spin as the truck convulsed. With one last tremble, the truck stilled and the spinning sign stopped. The music had changed, and so had the sign's content. Perry's Hamburgers, it read. Still crooked, the truck slowly crept down the street, and she pinched her curtains shut. Gridlock of the mind. The 405 stretched endlessly before me, a vein of asphalt pulsing with the dull monotony of brake lights. Every morning, I merged into the current of half-conscious souls, each of us trapped in the same routine, inching forward to destinations we resented. My corporate job barely paid my bills, and my spirit eroded with each passing day. Yet, like a prisoner resigned to their cell, I got into my car every morning, hoping, futilely, that something, anything, would change. Today felt no different. The same stifling air, the same murmur of the radio, the same dull ache pressing behind my eyes. I stared ahead, watching as the red taillights blinked and glowed in a never-ending pattern, hypnotic in their rhythm. I sighed, my hands gripping the wheel. This wasn't life. This was something else, some cruel purgatory where change was an illusion. As I drove, a strange sensation washed over me, an unsettling tug at the back of my mind. It was faint at first, like the nagging feeling of forgetting something important. My fingers tightened around the steering wheel. Had I left the stove on? No, I hadn't cooked in days. My laptop? No, it was in my bag, thrown onto the passenger seat in my usual morning autopilot. Then what? My phone rang, vibrating against the plastic cup holder. The number flashed on the screen. Unknown, but I knew better. Bill collectors. I clenched my jaw before answering, already bracing myself. Hello? A voice on the other end rattled off my name, their tone all business, all demand. We're calling about your outstanding balance. I exhaled sharply, my frustration boiling over. Do you think I don't know that? Do you think I just forgot? I'm sitting in traffic, wasting my life away every single day to make barely enough to survive. And you think I magically have money for you? Tell me, how am I supposed to pay you when I can't even afford to live? Silence. A pause. Then the collector launched into their script again, as if my words meant nothing. I hung up. Hard. The phone clattered onto the seat, and I turned the music up. Loud. A mix of music and Spotify affirmations played in an endless loop. You are strong. You are capable, a voice repeated. But the words felt hollow against the weight pressing down on me. I switched back to music, something loud enough to drown it all out. But after a few minutes, I found myself back on the affirmations, searching for something, anything that might stick. You are in control of your life, the voice insisted. I scoffed, flipping back to music again. The bass thumped through my chest, rattling through my bones, drowning out the rage, the helplessness, the crushing weight of it all. I shook the feeling off and pressed forward. But the thought gnawed at me, creeping into the corners of my mind like an itch I couldn't scratch. The traffic slowed, locking me into a dead stop between exits. I drummed my fingers against the wheel, the silence growing unbearable. Something was wrong. Something was missing. The air inside the car felt heavier now, oppressive. I adjusted my rearview mirror and caught a glimpse of my own eyes, shadowed and hollow. Was it always this way? Was I always this way? The weight of exhaustion bore down on me. My limbs felt heavier than they should. Had I slept enough last night? Had I ever slept enough? I closed my eyes, taking slow, steady breaths. But when I opened them, the scenery outside seemed different. The colors muted, the sounds dampened. My vision blurred for a moment before snapping back into focus. But the creeping unease remained. I was losing time. One moment, I was at the interchange, and the next, I was pulling into the parking garage beneath my office building. My heart pounded as I stepped out of the car, my legs unsteady, as if I had forgotten how to walk. The air felt wrong, too thick, too still. I moved through the lobby, the fluorescent lights above buzzing softly, pressing against my skull like a dull migraine. The elevator doors slid open, and I stepped inside. The mirrored walls reflected me back at myself. And for a fleeting moment, I saw something else. A blur, a shadow of someone who wasn't quite me. I blinked, and it was gone. The doors opened to my floor, and I walked down the sterile hallway, my footsteps muffled against the carpet. My hands were cold, my breath shallow. My mind screamed at me to turn back, to run. But my body moved forward, as if caught in the undertow of a dream. I reached my office door, hesitated, then turned the knob. The room was dark. The air smelled of familiarity, of something deeply personal. My breath hitched as I took a step inside, and the walls expanded, morphing, shifting. No, I wasn't at the office. I was home. My bedroom lay before me, unchanged and untouched, as if I had never left. My unmade bed, the half-empty coffee cup on my nightstand, the soft hum of the city outside my window. I stumbled backward, my heart hammering. How? I I had driven here. I had spent an hour in traffic. I had been walking into my office just moments ago. I turned, reaching for the door, but when I opened it, there was no hallway, just the same road, the same endless stretch of the 405. My hands trembled as I turned back toward my room, only to find it dissolving around me, slipping through my fingers like sand. And then I was back in my car. Traffic had barely moved. The radio played the same mindless chatter, and the clock on my dashboard blinked mockingly. 7:45 a.m., just like it always was. I let out a shaky breath, gripping the wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. My skin felt cold. My pulse raced. What was real? Where had I been? And then the realization hit me. I was late. I was still home. Still in bed. Still asleep. The panic rose, clawing up my throat as I fumbled for my phone, desperate to check the time, to wake myself up. But when I looked down, my hands weren't there. The car, the traffic, the drive, it wasn't real. I never left my bed. I was still dreaming, or living a nightmare over and over. The mysterious painting, after pushing back from its gate, the Swiss Air midday flight to New York moved slowly through a light snow flurry to its designated runway. The first-class cabin was less than half full. The passenger in 1A was pleased there was no one opposite. A smiling cabin crew offered him a glass of champagne. He declined, asking for double single malt. He thought about the voicemail, a somewhat guarded call, coming from someone he hadn't spoken to in 15 years. What drove his final response was the email attachment that followed. He'd tried retuning the call, but it went to voicemail. He sensed something was wrong. He'd barely had time to return to his apartment from where he'd been staying, find his passport, pack a new bag, and take his car service to the airport. Something was telling him missing the flight was not an option. Philippe Abano was an internationally recognized art specialist, having spent 35 years researching the French Impressionists, a group of artists whose collective works, long after their passing, at auction, would shake the art world to its foundations. As with many famous artists, there were finished canvases, although documented, which had never been located. The Nazi art plunder, which began in Germany in 1933, contributed to the loss of artworks across Europe. The French Impressionists were not exempt from this pillage. 48 hours previous, Marie Le Pen was an art restorer. She worked almost exclusively for the Metropolitan Museum of Art, specializing in the restoration of damaged watercolors. On occasion, she did private restoration with the museum's knowledge. She'd taken a call from a person representing a Mr. Retzlaff, saying she'd been recommended by her superior at the museum as someone to inspect a damaged watercolor he possessed. Marie, who loved her work, agreed to view the painting. She agreed a time the following day. Mr. Retzlaff would send a car. Very swish, she thought. After offloading her bags from the limousine sent for her, she looked around. The street was amazing. Narrow with private residences, no commercial properties. The houses all appeared to be of similar build, 5 or 6 floors above ground, with basements or walk-downs. Every property was maintained like new. Flowers and trees adorned the street. There was no garbage and no graffiti. The residence they stopped in front of was impressive, with red brick and huge floor-to-ceiling windows, edged with carved stone. At roof level, gargoyles peered down, surveying the scene. This was a part of New York most people would never see. Amazing. She followed the driver up the marble steps. He pulled on the brass handle and returned to the car. A man wearing a bow tie and black trousers answered. "Yes, madam?" he inquired. "I'm Marie Le Pen. I believe you're expecting me?" She smiled. "We are indeed, madam," the stern-faced man replied. The entrance hall was huge. She could smell timber and brass polish. The black and white checkered tiled floor was straight out of an English TV series. The doors leading off the foyer were all closed. A majestic, sweeping staircase held sway over the entrance. Huge brass vases, once filled with flowers, stood empty either side of the entrance. Apart from the electric light, the only modern consideration was a mechanical elevator. "Please," the man gestured, "follow me." They entered the elevator, along with her baggage. Marie watched as the man pressed 5. The door closed, and they began their ascent. On the 5th floor was another vestibule. This one had more polished timber and huge windows onto the street below. "This way." He gestured, then walked along a long corridor before he opened a large double door into what looked like a series of smaller spaces. If Marie hadn't had complete faith in her boss, she'd have been scared. At one side of the room, a man sat, straight-backed, with silver-gray hair. She guessed at least late 80s, wearing a green corduroy smoking jacket. He stood. She could smell cigar smoke. "Thank you for coming. I'm Peter Retzlaff. Fact is, Miss Le Pen, I need an expert opinion as to a certain painting that is in my possession. Should I, or should I not, restore it? Your superior at the Met spoke most highly of you." Marie saw several large art tables, specialist seats, and an array of instruments, all designed specifically for art restoration. She was gobsmacked. There had to be $1 million in equipment and instruments, brand new, some still in their original packaging, just sitting there. The old man waved his hand, and the valet unlocked a large steel cabinet with racks of what looked to Maria like canvases, painted canvases, in various stages of decomposition. Strange, she thought. He slid one of the racks out and removed a painting, a watercolor that Maria recognized. after putting on her smock and gloves, examined the item more closely. Behind her, a phone rang. The valet took a cell phone from his pocket and listened, then said something softly to the old man. They steeped away to the side of the room, out of earshot. Maria continued looking at the canvas, heavily water damaged with a once grand frame that also appeared flawed. She was about to make some preliminary notes into her phone. As she moved around the table, a splash of red caught her eye. The steel cabinet, which held the damaged painting, was open on one side. What she saw made her heart stand still. It was a large canvas of what appeared to be a small wooden bridge over water in a garden. Although no expert, she'd seen enough examples of French impressionistic work to know this could be one. Marie quickly turned her phone to camera, taking 2 quick shots, only to be interrupted by raised voices. The old man was saying something to the valet in what sounded like German, who dashed past her, securing the door to the cabinet, ending her view. She said nothing, returning to the recorder in her phone, her head down, trying to appear as though she was concentrating. The old man looked suspiciously at her, said nothing. She could feel his eyes. My God, what have you just seen? She asked herself. Maria spent the next 2 hours making notes and photographing the damage. She agreed to return the following day with her recommendations and estimates, should she consider it restorable. Retzlaff agreed, giving her a copy of a providence document relating to the painting, which she would need to study. He told her he would send a car for her at an agreed time. She shook his hand and returned to the waiting limousine. The previous 2 hours did not sit well with her. Quite why, she couldn't say. The images of the red canvas wouldn't leave her. The storm had hit with a vengeance. Sudden spring rain washing the roadways, reminding New Yorkers summer was not far away. The crowded eateries on the streets of the East Village were suddenly deserted, sending outside diners scrambling for shelter inside. From her small single-bed apartment off McDougal Street, above a drugstore, Maria sat looking at the 2 images she'd downloaded from her camera. The room was quiet, save for the rhythm of the rain tapping at her window. On the larger screen, she could see more clearly the image she'd snapped earlier. The images were very much French impressionistic, of the late 19th or early 20th century. She could see the attempt to produce work inspired by real life. It was revolutionary. French impressionist artists rejected classical subject matter in favor of modernity, seeking to produce works that represented their current circumstances and environments. The more she looked, the more she was convinced. It was what she suspected. My God, she exclaimed. Could it be a Monet, hidden in a steel cabinet in a residence on the Upper West Side? It would explain the old man's annoyance at the cabinet being left open, particularly in the presence of a third party who just happened to be an art restoration expert. Maria took stock, pouring another glass of wine, wondering what she should do next. She thought about the man who had mentored her 15 years ago at Switzerland's largest art museum, the Kunsthaus Zurich, Philippe Abano. If anyone could make sense on what she had seen, he could. She'd not had any contact with Philippe for over a decade. Now he worked in a private capacity, advising galleries and writing books on the subject of French art, in particular, French Impressionism. His web page provided email and phone contact details. Maria thought carefully as how she should frame the call without identifying the object. Before she made the call, she uploaded the 2 photographs into a separate folder, attaching it to the email address she had for Felipe Abano. Suspecting the call would go to voicemail, she'd prepared a statement. At 10:30 p.m., she made the call, voicemail. She introduced herself, telling him of her current position at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, reminding him of their previous association, how she'd come to see what she'd seen, making no reference to a place or names, asking him for his opinion as to the images attached to the following email. Finishing the call, she pressed the send button. In the street below, a man sat in a black limousine, its wipers on intermittent sweeps, clearing the spitting rain, watching the illuminated small window above the drugstore. The Swiss Air flight gathered speed as it approached its takeoff point at Zurich Airport. Food and service trolleys rattled in their compartments as the aircraft's nose finally lifted into a gray, overcast day, the engines screaming. Philippe Abano was anxious and at the same time nervous, processing what he'd heard and seen in the previous few hours from one Maria Le Pen. Once the pilot had removed the seatbelt sign, he reached for his laptop. Putting on his glasses, began his search. East Village, New York City. Detectives Allison Maroney and her partner, Alex Sonny, stood at the open door of 1A, the apartment above the drugstore in the East Village. They flashed their shields at the uniform on the door. "What we got?" Allison inquired. The uniformed officers' badges read Lomax. "So, Officer Lomax, talk to us." The officer opened his notebook. A deceased female found dead after we gained entry, possible gunshot. A Miss Holland. He gestured upwards. In 2A, reported a cat calling and scratching at the deceased's door. Apparently, the tenant regularly let her cat out when she came home from work, and then opened up when Pussy wanted in. Except, this time, no response. Cat keeps calling. She, Miss Holland, knocked. Nothing. As she heard the tenant arrive earlier that evening, she was reluctant to use the spare key she had, deciding to call 911 instead. We attended. The cat was still scratching at the door. Miss Holland gave us the key and witnessed a non-forced entry. We discovered the body and called the station, securing the scene. The ME who arrived shortly after we called it in puts time of death at around 8 p.m., give or take. Pulling on latex gloves, Detective Maroney knelt next to the body. ID? Yes. A wallet with cash and cards. A Maria Le Pen, 37, works at the Metropolitan Museum as an art restorer. ID shows her address as here. No driver's license. Detective Sunny moved carefully around the small room. Laptop? Cell? Neither, though I'm guessing she had both. They're chargers for each in here and in the bedroom. To recap, Sunny offers. No phone, no laptop, nothing taken except said cell and computer. Not a robbery then, and no sign of a forced entry. Sunny looked at his partner skeptically, shrugging his huge shoulders. Single gunshot between the eyes, small caliber, maybe, .22. Very professional. This look like a hit to me, Maroney offered. What do you think? After 3 hours of intense in-flight investigation, Philippe Abanot concluded it was a work by Claude Monet, albeit a later work. His once subtle transitions between shades became bolder and less precise, reflecting the challenges posed by his deteriorating eyesight. Monet's health struggles extended beyond his eyes, but his vision loss had the most direct impact on his art. And it was this Philippe Abanot recognized. He'd even found a reference to a non-catalogued work titled Pont sur l'eau bleue, Bridge over Blue Water. It was listed as one of several, being prepared by Monet's agent for exhibit in Paris. The exhibition never eventuated, the listed paintings unaccounted for. This was no great mystery for Armand. A number of explanations could be found. The artist withdrew the works, no reason given. An issue with the gallery, or sold before exhibition. The latter Armand found more convincing. It would also explain its anonymity for over a century, a private or family collection that may have suffered at the hands of the Nazi art plunder of the 30s. The whereabouts of many were still unknown. Either way, a mystery that may well be explained when he was to meet with Maria Le Pen in 4 hours' time, the demon in the portrait. Denise Gray looked away from her reflection in the store window. The sight of that perfectly proportioned young body only served to remind her of the curse. As a young woman, she'd posed for an enigmatic artist who had painted her picture while spinning words that were at once wonderful and frightening. It hadn't been long after that she learned the reality of the painting and its associated curse. One day, she was accosted by a thief. And before she realized what was happening, he had run a dagger through her heart. She cringed, but when the thief pulled the knife out, there was no blood where she had been stabbed. A swift kick to the groin sent him running, but when she opened her now ruined blouse, she realized that she was unharmed, not even a scratch. Denise thought about it and realized that her situation was like a story her mother had told her, called The Painting of Dorian Gray. "Damn," she whispered as she scraped her knee on a large rock that she'd brushed against, only to look down and realize that her forever young body was still unharmed. She realized that she would have to return to the artist's studio. And if that painting was damaged, she would have to force the artist to find a way to lift the curse without killing her before her time. When she returned to confront the artist, she found him hanging in his studio, dead. Her search for the painting in his studio was in vain, and it was only after another attack that she realized the truth of the curse. The knife had pierced her heart. But again, she felt no pain after the knife had been pulled from her chest. She tracked the painting down to a gallery in a distant town, only to watch the painting destroyed by fire as the gallery burned to the ground, killing the hundreds of people inside. She'd spent many hours waiting for the death that never came. After that, she tried every means of killing herself, but to no avail. Finally, she felt a glimmer of hope as she learned of a book of paintings that had a copy of her painting in it. That book was rumored to be in this tiny library. She took a deep breath as she approached the tiny library. She knew she had to do something, or she would go insane from not being able to die. Denise had arrived just as Jessie had left the library and moved toward the tavern. An hour while the poor, pregnant librarian took lunch wouldn't make a lot of difference, she thought, as she sat down on a nearby bench. She smiled as a group of children ran by. One little brown-eyed girl stopped and smiled back, then ran to join her friends. "The book you want is here," Jessie said, "but you may be disappointed. The book is a manual for destroying demons." "I don't feel like a demon," Denise said. Jessie slid the leather hand-bound book toward Denise. "What happens if I open it?" Jessie shrugged. "I haven't read that far." Denise felt a tingling race up her arm as she pulled the book toward herself. What if she got sucked into the book when she opened it? She looked down at her ruined blouse. She'd neglected to change the blouse, even though she had another in her small travel bag. Throwing caution to the wind, she opened the book. Being stuck in the book would be no worse than not being able to kill herself. The first thing she saw was a horrible version of herself. Her hair was singed, and every injury she'd sustained in getting there had scarred over. When she could finally pull her eyes away from the picture, she began to read. The demon her painting had become had spoken from the painting and convinced the artist to hang himself. Then she had started the fire that destroyed the original painting, killing all the people there for the unveiling. Denise slammed the book closed. The pull of the woman in the painting was more than she could stand. "Are you affected as well?" Denise asked, only to be met by a blank stare from Jessie. A few moments later, her unborn child, kicking wildly, stirred Jessie back to life. "We have to destroy the book," Denise said. Jessie shook her head. "She will take us all with her." Denise slammed her hand down on the book before Jessie could open it. "That's exactly what she wants you to think. But trust me, Jessie's unborn baby kicked so hard that she gasped. "I can't help you. I'll take care of it," Denise said, taking the book and leaving the library. Denise counted herself lucky that the tiny library was on a small tropical island with an active volcano. It would only take her half a day to get to the volcano cone, light the book on fire, and drop it into the liquid lava below. She only hoped that would be enough. As she moved toward the volcano, the book and the demon it contained recognized her intent. "Hand over that book," the huge Polynesian man standing in her way said, his gun drawn. On some level, Denise knew that the man was under the influence of the demon. She ran around him and felt the bullet from his gun rip through the ruined blouse and on through her right shoulder. By the time she reached the trail at the edge of the volcano, she could feel the demon trying to stop her. Branches and thorns reached out for her, only to rip more holes in her ruined blouse as she ran toward the summit. Finally, she reached the edge of the cauldron and the bubbling lava below. "No!" The sound of the wind and the rush of the heat shouted as the edges of the book began to smoke. The book burst into flames as she tossed the book toward the lava. It hung suspended above the lava, flaming bigger and brighter, but without being consumed. Suddenly, she noticed that the young girl she'd seen before had caught up to her. "It's drawing power from your blouse." Denise shook her head. None of this made sense. The blouse had taken the brunt of the damage inflicted on her and was ragged and full of holes. "You have to destroy the blouse as well," the girl said, before racing away from the lip. At the bottom of the trail, she saw the other children blocking the way of the adults who were under the influence of the book. Denise turned to see flame explode from the book and realized that she had no choice. If destroying the blouse didn't work, she would have to offer herself to the volcano. But this glimmer of hope had given her a reason to live. She pulled the remains of that ruined blouse off and threw it down at the boiling lava below. The atmosphere around the book howled in rage as the blouse fluttered to the surface of the lava and then burst into flames. The book exploded, scattering burning ash over everything. Before Denise could react, the same young girl was pulling her away from the lip of the cauldron. She stumbled into the group and children, and then her world went black. Denise remembered that blouse as the one that the artist had insisted she wear while he worked on the painting. What happened after that was a blur until that book exploded over the cauldron. She took a deep breath and opened her eyes to the soft light of the sun coming in through the curtains of a cottage near the ocean. It was a dream, she thought, until she realized that she wasn't wearing the blouse anymore. The painting and the book had been destroyed, but she didn't know about the curse. She inspected her body and then wrapped a sheet around her till she could find some clothes. Denise opened the door and saw children playing in front of the cottage, then stepped onto the porch and noticed a thorny bush near the steps into the yard. She idly pricked her finger and gave a sigh of relief as she realized that the curse was gone when a tiny drop of blood formed on her finger. "The children told us how you saved us," Jessie said as she approached from the side yard. Denise shrugged. "I needed to be free of the curse," Jess smiled. "The children like having you around, and we are in the market for school teacher." Denise had never considered anything like this. She'd been so young when the nightmare started. She looked down. Her body was still young, and if the kids had trusted her, maybe she could try. "It beats modeling," she thought, as she followed Jessie back toward the cottage. "Care